Hi, this is Carrie Lavery with Baker University's Fab 5 Learning Team, representing Cheryl Alvarado and Jen Nelson, who unfortunately were not able to make the trip to Kansas from Michigan and California, respectively. I am today interviewing Patricia Ross. She is a 40-year veteran of the public school system and received a master's from Marshall in, what year was that?
67.
In 67. So she is definitely well versed in all things American history. To get started, we're going to just kind of go over the basics of Truman. He happens to be one of her favorite presidents, and she knows a lot about him. So that being said, we'll go ahead and get started, and I will introduce Miss Ross. The camera's freezing. That's not good, is it? Okay. Wherever you're comfortable.
Okay.
Is that good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Say hi. I don't know, can't make it any more cheesy. Okay, so what is it exactly that makes Harry Truman so interesting to you?
I think what it was is I grew up in a Republican family in Appalachia that voted Republican no matter who was on the ticket. And they were always complaining about Truman. And then when I started reading history, I realized how significant he was to the survival of the United States. I realized that he had, in effect, desegregated the military, dropped a bomb that ended World War II, gave our enemies in Europe food, provided them with money to rebuild. He did all kinds of things that were long range, and there were some things that I didn't agree with, but for the most part, I consider him to be one of the great presidents. I think probably in another 50 years, he will be on the top 10 great presidents of the country, or even higher. I rate him right up there above, right there with Washington, Lincoln.
He's considered one of the greats now, but he definitely wasn't when he left office.
I mean, to know how I grew up with him, how my community and my neighbors and my family felt, and then to read about him, I just had a 180 change. Great man when you see him.
Yeah. And you've actually been to the Wallace home, and of course Beth Wallace is the woman that Truman ended up marrying in Independence, Missouri. I think that was one of the first things that you did when you got to Kansas.
Yeah.
And you've seen his presidential library. What was that like?
That was wonderful. I mean, there were so many things they had, and it was all most of it is display, because Americans are not going to read for anything. And I just realized all the wonderful things that he had done that I had completely forgotten about, because when I taught history, you have to pick the high points. And I always picked desegregation of the forces, and I picked, I can't even remember the name we had to go to Germany, where we sent money to Germany.
The Berlin airlift?
Well, there was the airlift, but we also gave them money. And when I was a little girl, we fixed shoeboxes full of goodies for all the children in Berlin who didn't have food. We put in cookies and socks. We did this 3 or 4 times a year when I was in school. And then they took them, and like we send stuff to the troops today, we sent this to mainly Germany and France, but it was mainly the ones that I remember. Ours went to Germany. And
pardon the interruption. That's my 6-year-old making noise over there.
That's okay. Well, that's fine. And I thought the most interesting thing that I was in Miami, Ohio at the university taking a week-long seminar one time, and I met this German lady who came up to me and says, "I want to thank you." And I said, "Why?" And she says, "Because I bet you're one of those people who sent boxes to me, and I used to get them regularly, and it did keep us alive."
Wow.
And I thought, wow. So
that's pretty impressive, yeah.
I thought that was cool, and that was my moment of touching history. But, when I read what Truman has done, and he had those really good, he was based, and he knew what was right, and he did what was right. He didn't do what was, now sometimes he was politically expedient, you have to be, but for the most part, he looked at it, and then he did what was right, and he got a lot of guff for it. He got most of his opposition, they were Republicans, but he got a lot of opposition from the Democrats because they were Dixiecrats. Can you imagine how that went over in the South, 1948, when we said no more segregation of the forces?
Yeah.
So
Well, that being said, I'm going to take a little bit of break in recording, and then we'll get into the bombings and the fair deal, which is kind of what this focus is on. So forgive me, I am not the most technologically advanced.